One evening, as was her habit, Edith asked me if I had any predictions for the coming year. In response, I mentioned what I thought might happen, as I did at my weekly group meetings. I was often asked the same, and my answers were always based upon my ardent wish for the entire human race. Peace. My thoughts are always based on the importance of people being genuinely optimistic and more positive, for I want to see a happier world. I want to see humanity living without strife, enmity, and hurt to one another. A humanity living in peace, harmony, and unity. Maybe I am an everlasting idealist, but then again, why should it not be possible? I did not need to be a fortune teller to suggest things like that, yet there have been people hoping I would predict and talk about more drastic issues, such as climate change, or meteors colliding with Earth, the end of the world, and more doom and gloom. I prefer to fill my world with nicer thoughts and constructive ideas that the whole of humanity can benefit from. I endeavor to tell my audience that the wars and discordance humans have created throughout their arduous history could be dealt with once they start thinking positively. That may mean giving up their cult-based beliefs. Alas, the world seems to be saturated with hatred, jealousies, and revenge. However, if common sense prevailed, people accepting each other as one human family, everybody concerned about the welfare of one another, without any religious dogma, for it has proved to be the destroyer of peace, in the name of some mythological supreme being, they would be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. If people would only get together amicably and talk about their differences, they would realize that all their war efforts and resultant sufferings are futile. Desirous to see positive and beautiful things in others, I avoid talking about the falsehoods, separations, racially motivated hatred, religious fantasies, and fears the world seems to display. When you read my statements, you soon discover that they are only an observation regarding my personal experiences and struggles to find solutions to the unfortunate circumstances which engulfed me in the past. However, if and when a disaster is likely to happen, and I can sense it through my own observations and feelings, I'm always ready to inform others without lecturing them. Over the years, I have been warning my close associates and friends about the need for them to reduce their habits of smoking until they were able to stop altogether, as I could see where they were heading with their health. Some did not take me very seriously, but soon discovered how right I was, although their well-being was of utmost importance to me. Since my childhood, I have developed a sense of feeling the earth move, particularly when standing in front of the rising or setting sun. Similarly, I developed a sense of hearing the sounds of the earth under my feet, especially when standing by the seashore or on a farm in the middle of the night. By listening to the deepening sounds of a constant noise, I know there's something not in order. By listening to sounds of such a constant rumble, I can predict earth tremors or major earthquakes. You might think that I'm probably dreaming about that also, but of course you are, as always, free to choose. When visiting friends in Ankara and elsewhere, I used to tell them to duck or hide under tables when I felt the necessity. Those who did not believe or laughed at me soon discovered why I did so. Some even asked me how I knew what was to happen. Others claimed that I must be psychic, yet I have never claimed or bragged about being what they thought of me. When I was near a volcano, after hearing specific rumbles coming from the depths of the earth, I was able to tell them when an eruption was likely to occur. I always believed that we, all of us, had the ability to hear those rumbles. However, in our modern and practical world, many of us have distanced ourselves from the reality of certain feelings and sensations which are an integral part of being a human. Thankfully, our animals are still capable of sensing and hearing things we seem to deny. Some of us are influenced to dismiss those natural sensations as being our childhood fantasies. Children are particularly good at sensing all kinds of things within their colorful worlds, but are often ignored as if they are just imagining things. Remember, whatever can be imagined, some truth can be found in it, for imagination is real. When Edita asked me to predict something about a week before a major worldwide event took place, while looking at a map of the Philippines, I told her about a mountain with a strange name starting with the letter P, which was likely to erupt, but I did not know why I said that. I also told her that it was probably an ancient volcano. She looked at me as if to ask how I knew, even perhaps not really believing. She said, "We have many volcanoes, and most of them have remained inactive for a long time." Then she showed me pictures of an asymmetrical volcano and explained that it was my own volcano, and more than 2,400 meters above Legazpi in South Luzon. "There could be one other," she added, "but it has been asleep some hundreds of years, so it could not be the one either. It is called Pinatubo." I told her it was unclear to me why I thought of the letter P. However, if we could take it as a prediction, she must notify her relatives living nearby. She was unsure how to relay a message like that to her brother. I suggested telling him that it was in Suren's dream. It could be real. Remember, people accept dreams and imaginings as more real than actual facts. I was not going to deny my ability to clearly hear the strong rumbles from the depths of the earth, and pondered whether there was any valid evidence in predicting a local tremor. However, the volcano I was concentrating on was far away from where I lived. Probably I was inspired. To put my theory to the test, I suggested Edita urge her relatives to move out from there for a few days, hoping they would listen to her. I believe she spoke about it to her brother, Tony, and they all had the same opinion as Edita had originally suggested. Some people she knew were living in Baguio and others nearby villages. However, they have all taken that alleged prediction lightly, perhaps like a joke. I could not dwell on that issue for long, and yet hoped that I had not wasted my time warning them. It was impossible to explain to her some of the things I was capable of doing, and remember, she preferred to think of the whole prediction as a psychic endeavor. My ex-wife and her faithful brothers would respond to such a prediction with extreme fear and trepidation, and claim it to be demonic activity. Edita showed me photographs of a volcano which showed lava spewing from its top. It looked stunning, and I have copied them, but she insisted Pinatubo was definitely not the one. A week later, the whole world was talking about Mount Pinatubo, which had erupted and spewed lava and ash all over the area. The ash cloud it produced in the atmosphere covered much of the earth as it circled the globe. It could also be seen from space and was photographed. There was no human loss, but it caused health problems and economic disaster as it covered the land and nearby villages, as well as some rice fields with thickly laid fine pumice. Those who had originally heard this prediction were really astounded, but Editha, for some strange reason, kept silent. In fact, she completely ignored it afterwards. Perhaps she was shocked, or could not digest it. She might have been disturbed that somebody else was more knowledgeable than herself. Even if I considered this as only a theory, I knew I was to discover the real motive behind her uniqueness later. If you ask me why I made such a prediction in the first place, it was because I felt obliged to do so, and considering the rumbles I felt, I uttered what first came to mind, and strangely enough, I did not take it very seriously at the time either. But it shocked me when it actually happened. I doubted if I was hearing them from such a long distance, and it may have been a coincidence, but then again, maybe not. I really wished I could visit those islands to see the volcanoes for myself and help people if I could, or just console them. This wish alone was strange, for normally people would avoid going into danger zones. I still do not know why I wanted to do so. I again encouraged my group to think positively with the aim of spreading a thought of peace around the world. We were attempting to discover if mind over matter really worked. If one could prove it to be true, we would know for sure that thoughts could influence molecules and therefore objects. I remember when my brother and I used to blow into the air, and amazingly, every time we did so, a cool breeze or mini storm caused the trees to sway. We know that some human ailments can be assisted for the better, remembering that perception is the reality, and if one believes in something, it may become real. However, Margaret's negative input about me continued with Malek and Edgar from time to time, and also whenever she was in Melbourne, attending those gatherings which were under my directive. Malek and her friends began to question me, my integrity as a friend, my sincerity, and my morals, while trying not to make it too obvious. Margaret has certainly not been a positive influence. I felt even then that they wanted to stop the group, but at the insistence of others, we continued. Now they were advising me to get married to Margaret, saying that she was the best match, although I had repeatedly explained that we hardly knew each other, meeting her in my Perth studio for the first time when she visited Western Australia, and whenever we met she only spoke about her work-related disappointments and romantic fantasies. When I visited Sydney and met her, we never spoke about anything positive other than her own traumas. We did not know each other in any other way. I had a very strong feeling that their Sai Baba-related group leader was still not very happy about my input, and apparently did not want to lose his group to philosophy and science. Besides, it was a source of income for him. Margaret, who loved to stay at ashrams, felt more at home with them, for she adored Sai Baba. As mentioned, that other gentlemen preferred his kind of meditations for a fee over my voluntary activities, during which I utilized positive visualization techniques. It was also then that one of the members attending my group recommended for the first time that I visit Muriel's group in Springvale, which was not far from where I lived. I was told that they had regular guests lecturing on a variety of specifically chosen subjects, New Age and spiritual. Who knew what interesting people one would meet there? Learning a few new things, and even perhaps finding feasible answers to some of our age-old questions. It sounded very positive, and I decided to contact them sometime soon. At Melek and Edgar's, only decision-maker, however, was Melek. Probably encouraged by Edgar and members of the group, Melek wanted to continue with the program I presented for a while, but there was a chill in the air between her and me, especially after her verbalized concerns in regard to poor darling Margaret. If there was any chance of me being involved with Margaret, as Melek was demanding at every opportunity, she would probably feel happier to associate with me as the group leader. I failed to understand why even that aspect of my life needed to be designed and controlled by other people. Although I responded to her regarding how I felt about Margaret, and that we did not know each other well, completely opposite to each other's interests, she was adamant in her resolve. Whatever I said fell on deaf ears. Who knows what Margaret was feeding them with? Perhaps her being a Sai Baba devotee was enough for Melek to think the way she did. She looked totally uninterested in what I explained and was almost angry with me. Edgar, however, realized that what I explained was a truth statement, and her assumptions about what was right for me were not correct. Melek appeared to be disappointed. After all her supposed kindness and caring nature towards her friends, even her notable advice for me to marry Margaret, it seemed that I was expected to follow it through. It felt as if I had been ordered to do so, and apparently I was expected to dance to every tune they played. I experienced precisely the same feelings when sharing a room with the Strohbachs a long time ago in Germany, and soon after with my ex-wife for a very long time. Margaret, too, had similar attitudes in commanding and demanding. It might have been greatly fulfilling just for one person, but at what cost to my completely undermined and ignored needs? I was unsure what damage Margaret had caused, and to what extent. On the other hand, did they really appreciate me? Did they really value my time and effort? According to Melek, Margaret was a darling woman who cared for me, whereas according to Edgar, there seemed to be something not quite right with that darling woman. He advised Melek that it would be far better to listen to both sides of the story. These kinds of demands therefore helped me to decide to have absolutely no connection with Margaret and the like for at least a long while of forever. Margaret's obsessive and tragically possessive nature, desirous to be always correct in regard to someone like me, needing to take all the blame for those alleged sins not committed, completely turned me off. Edita, on the other hand, told me about her desire to visit the Philippines, her brother, and other friends very soon. I was certainly very keen to have a break from my unending traumas and visit that country, once again conducting research and documenting it. Doing so in their major cities and townships, studying the traditions of the colorful locals, and producing a video documentary would be the delightful change I needed. When I spent time in the Philippines previously, I had been involved with their university system, and therefore had very little time to see and discover more about their lifestyles. This time, for example, I wanted to see how their faith healers scored. I was going to be a freelancing guest researcher, but perhaps acting like a tourist. I could travel with Edita and stay with her brother and his family for a while, as such a suggestion had already been made. In fact, they wanted to visit places where those faith healers could be seen, discovering the origins of alleged miracles, like those blood and oil-crying statues, and the miraculous appearances of Jesus and Mother Mary in the skies. I was going to remain completely impartial and neutral in my endeavors. Tony was a devout Catholic and very religious, while also being keenly interested in ancient church buildings and cathedrals. Their architectural designs have always fascinated me as well. He was interested in photographing them wherever he went. He was a well-respected attorney and scholar at law. According to Edita, his family was not allowing him any room to breathe and have peace, accusing him of being disloyal. He was happy and very excited to get to know me as a scholarly friend and as his sister's companion. I was not sure what Edita had told him about me, but was certain that I was presented as if being totally in love with her. It would not be wrong to be considered like this if circumstances were more favorable. However, I did not know her, and certain characteristics of her still needed to be further unearthed, as I had no intention of stepping on ice. I also knew that she had been thinking about us being soulmates. Even if this might have been the reality, I still needed to get to know her better. She had romantic dreams, for she grew up in a society influenced by Spanish Romanticism, and when younger had been writing poems to an imagined lover, whilst also collecting poetic expressions on aspects of love. She reflected her teenage ideals in her writings, even though many years had passed. She was disillusioned in love after all those decades, but as she often exclaimed, the spark in her heart remained alive. Like many of us, she had her heartaches and disappointments. Like many of us, she wanted to recapture those wonderful romantic feelings, until she discovered how impossible to achieve that level of happiness was. After all those years, the spark never disappears. The dream still remains, no matter how impossible fulfillment may be. From our teenage years, we all seem to experience life's hidden tragedies and unexpected disappointments. I also had my share of this, but the question remains, what are we doing about it? Do we need to put ourselves into a dull coma? Can we make life work to our advantage so that we can become wiser as we mature? I can understand other people's trends and expressions, no matter how sophisticated or simplistic they are. I had a few disappointments and often found myself in the oblivion, but right now I was extremely anxious about my current existence and not interested in any romantic involvement. I was not fully recovered from my own traumatic experiences, which had nearly destroyed me. Falling in love might perhaps help me, as some friends propounded, but the possibility of ending up in absolute misery due to unknown elements would be devastating. Being influenced to live in fear under the pressure of some religious darkness for a long while during one's younger days, forced to think of everything in the world being evil, full of hatred, projected from the very hearts of those so-called faithful, was very hard to shake off. It was going to take a long time to recover, although one may think that one is probably immune to such conditions. In my case, I believed that my past had no effect on my person any longer, but the fear remained hidden until I faced the prospect of seeing a different light. Having been liberated from such dull and one-track mindedness, I was subjected to allow the light to shine again, and the pieces of the complex puzzle of life started to come together. One could now see how manipulative those so-called faithful ones were. Those I had been introduced to by my cousins have indeed tried hard to suppress every freedom the young needed in order to learn and grow strong, to mature and succeed in life. They wanted to control my every move and every thought, but I remained stubborn, thus helping me survive the ordeal. I used the opportunity to my advantage, thanks to my invisible childhood friend. However, having associated with those faithful ones during my marriage had a bad influence upon my being. and it remained hidden until I was reawakened to the evidence of life, possibly love and romance. Such experiences also rendered me into someone who became overly cautious. Because of my outlook, people assumed and remarked that I was extraordinarily mature and wise for a child. Maybe I was. Maybe it was just my own aware self. Maybe I was one of the clever children and an intelligent youth for my age. But I did not have the capacity to decide on my actions like fully grown and mature people. When I was a teenager, my friend had been a great help in making wise choices. I knew it was unbelievable for the practically minded, but to me it was my reality. In truth, I was left completely without any guidance, and I believe my brother was the same, apart from our dear mother's input. Indeed, a boy's closest and genuinely the very first best friend is his mother. Therefore, any disappointments or happiness experienced by that best friend would also have a lasting effect on the young. Our mother was not under the influence of religious dogma. I am very grateful for that. She was a highly intelligent woman and often very philosophical. She was capable of training herself, finding ways to survive beyond her means, although at times she presented a tendency towards being naive. Some of her trends were passed on to my brother and me. Realizing that one could survive in all circumstances and be inventive. However, a little help from others would make things easier. I cannot deny the fact that I was completely alone and have been the one helping many others. Through my own experiences, I learned to make comparisons at a very early age and comprehend the complex issues people presented. The subjects I studied during my youth and later practiced had some forbearing. In Edita's case, having grown up in the beautiful Philippines, she would love to have rekindled her teenage fantasies and romance. However, I was extremely fearful to start anything like that. I was fearful of starting a brand new romantic affair because I was badly hurt. Repeating myself, I will say that we did not know each other well, and I could not pretend that we had known each other long before, unless, of course, one could imagine that we lived before, somewhere else, in our former incarnation, and were somehow familiar with each other, as she constantly claimed. Such a thought may be unnecessary if we could accept that all of us are somewhat united, perhaps considering that unity as an aspect of the universal consciousness we all share. Maybe that is what makes us feel familiar to each other. Falling in love, as we all discovered, or still are discovering, is a very serious and responsible experience. We feel fulfilled and complete when we are in love. When it is no longer felt, we seem to fall apart. It is very hard to find answers to why this is so. When I met Edita the way it happened, I felt lacking in love due to my emotional nature being almost completely destroyed. I felt frozen somewhere in time in a deserted place. I felt lost, as if having fallen into a mud pool, trying to swim towards solid ground unsuccessfully. Certainly things could become more favorable, but some aspects of her characteristics, influenced through the years, and her hidden personal experiences were not going to make things easy. My disappointments and expectations would not help either. She loved being listened to. However, listening to others was a different matter. I could not fall in love without knowing the other reasonably well, and physical attributes alone could not determine the outcome for lasting love. Without acceptance of every aspect of the other, one could not truly fall in love, except perhaps only in one's dreams. When prospective partners start knowingly or unknowingly placing hindrances to each other's progress and begin lecturing about the weaknesses they display instead of dwelling more on the positive attributes, that love is bound to remain a fantasy. Selfishness, in the form of as long as I have all the comfort, care and love, cannot paint a beautiful tableau to be enjoyed by both parties. I had been discreetly told by Edita's friends and associates that she was a good woman, needing my utmost love and care, for she was badly hurt by the man she was previously married to. They never asked me about my past and my needs. In fact, they never desired to listen to me, only advising me to marry her. It was exactly the same with Melek, demanding that I marry Margaret. They might have known what kind of person I was, perhaps psychically, perhaps even in their dreams. I was also advising them about the need to get to know each other better first. The word marriage was no longer appealing to me, for it always seemed to be associated with unnecessary disappointments, accusations, hatred, abductions, religious intolerance, anger, fear, and uncertainties. I could not explain to them about how I felt, knowing they all had to be right, and I could never be correct, even when I was. However, I appreciated their concerns, for it was obvious that they cared for their friend, who followed their beliefs. It pleases me immensely to see people caring for one another, but they never considered how I felt.